Welcome to the Regular Catholic Guy Show with your host, Jeff Garrett, a podcast for regular Catholic men who want to get into the trenches to learn about their Catholic faith, marriage, raising kids, and other Catholic guy stuff. Enjoy the show. Father?
Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, except baseball season's over.
I know. This is a very difficult time of the year. But, so far we're like 3 days into the off season as we record this, and I'm still holding it together. But spring training can start tomorrow. That'd be fun.
February 25th.
Yes, pitchers and catchers report, I think 96 days now. But who's counting?
Me.
Yeah. Was it springtrainingcountdown.com? It's one of my favorite websites this time of year.
We have some great questions today.
Oh, good.
Let's get started.
Yeah, since we don't have baseball, let's do questions.
Have to have something to do.
There you go.
And speaking of something to do, the first question comes from Jeff.
Oh, dear. You can't trust anybody named Jeff, right?
Okay. You can.
Okay, the questioner, Jeff, we don't mean you. We're talking about other Jeffs.
Are there any Advent books that you'd recommend, Father?
Oh, Lord. How long do we have? There are so many good books out there for Advent. The first one that comes to mind when you say that, Jeff, is the book of Isaiah.
That's in a bigger book.
It's in a bigger book, yes, and you may have heard of this. But especially the first several chapters with all the Emmanuel prophecies and all that kind of thing, so much of our Christmas spirituality and readings and so on comes from the book of Isaiah. So, the first thing I would do is just sit down and start reading the book of the prophet Isaiah, and you'll get all the famous stuff about the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and she'll name him Jesus and all that kind of, or name him Emmanuel, I'm sorry. On and on like that. So that's where I would start, probably there. Then with the Infancy Naratives, which are in Matthew and Luke. Mark doesn't have one and John doesn't have one, but Matthew and Luke, they talk about when Jesus was born and all that kind of a thing. So start there. Now, as far as other books that you could read on the Advent season, things like that, one that comes to mind is it's not necessarily an Advent book, but Advent is a very Marian time of the year. Fulton Sheen, Bishop Sheen, has a book out there on Mary called The World's First Love, I think it's called. And anything that guy writes is well worth reading. So give you that recommendation. Pope Benedict, in his 3-volume series on Jesus of Nazareth, the first volume of it is the Infancy Narratives. It's a very much shorter book than the other two, but still, it's Benedict. It's not a quick read. You read Benedict, you read one page, and you've got enough to chew on for a week. But all well worth it. Benedict has some amazing insights. The man is brilliant. Another one I'll recommend to you, I do these Advent meditations on my Facebook page every year, and the book I'm going to be using this year is by Father Marko, Toups, Toups, and it's called Rejoice, Advent Meditations with Joseph. It's going through the season of Advent basically with St. Joseph as our companion. And I've looked through it. I'm planning on using it for the meditation. It's really good stuff in there. So that's one I'd recommend. But in all honesty, Jeff, I could sit here and give you books about Advent for like 3 hours and still not have exhausted it all. There's so much good stuff out there. Check out the early church fathers and see what they had to say about Advent. Leo the Great in particular had some really good stuff. His Christmas sermons are really good stuff. And you can find a lot of this on the New Advent website. Just in the upper right-hand corner of the homepage on there, it says Fathers or something like that. Just click on that, and it takes you to a whole list of writings of the Church Fathers. And there's all kinds of good stuff there. But there's such a richness of beautiful things. One other thing you might consider doing now that I'm thinking about it is get into the Liturgy of the Hours and the Office of Readings. The biblical reading and then the non-biblical reading in the Office of Readings, some really, really powerful stuff for Advent meditations. So basically, Jeff, what I'd advise you to do is just dive in, and you'll find some good stuff.
When are you starting your Advent reflections, Father?
First Sunday of Advent.
And what time?
Well, the live video will be at 6 in the morning. What am I thinking? I have no idea. I'm not a morning person, but I do them at 6 in the morning, and then they'll be on my Facebook page. I'll have the privacy settings set for public, so you don't even have to be my friend on Facebook or anything like that. You don't even have to have a Facebook account. You can just go and find it. And it'll be there in perpetuity. You don't have to get up at 6 o'clock and make sure that you're awake at that time to see it. It'll be on my Facebook page for whenever you want to watch it.
We'll put the notes for books that you might want to be able to read during the Advent season. We'll put a link to Father's Facebook page also in the show notes.
That'd be great.
Our next question comes from Jack.
Okay, Jack.
Jack says, I've noticed a lack of information that the media does not carry regarding issues and events affecting the Catholic Church. And trying to keep up with the current issues and an open mind at the same time, I even found that EWTN does not cover everything going on in the world that affects the Catholic Church. For instance, the midterm election, I do not know if any of the candidates are going against church teaching and doctrine.
Okay.
And I've found other websites and news services online. And some of them speak highly of the church, and other ones have very negative things about some of the bishops and the Pope. And I was wondering, I find much of this reporting information is against the Catholic Church and their teaching. Is it okay to continue watching this type of reporting?
Well, Jack, you put your finger right on an issue that all Catholics need to be well aware of, is that reporting on church issues and church topics and things like that, it runs the gamut from stuff that is virulently anti-Catholic to fairly balanced stuff, to stuff that almost too much whitewashes the church. You know, I'm thinking of coverage of sex abuse scandals, and there was stuff that said this proves that the church is the spawn of Satan, and other coverage saying, nothing like that ever happened, and anybody who says it is hate, and all that kind of a thing. So it runs the complete spectrum. So Jack, I guess, to get to your question, is it a sin? Is it against church teaching to continue to watch this stuff? No, it's not, but you have to be careful to be an informed consumer of news. The example that you gave, for example, about this election, which was just yesterday as we record this, you said you're having a hard time finding, like on EWTN or anywhere, whether candidates go against church teaching. I don't know where you live, Jack, but here in the Archdiocese of Omaha, they put out a voter guide every election season. And what they do is they send a questionnaire to candidates and say, where do you stand on the following issues? And then all they do, they don't come out, the diocese doesn't come out and say, we hereby endorse this candidate or that candidate. They just put out the facts. They say, this candidate believes this candidate believes that, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if you're here in the Archdiocese of Omaha, you can access that easily. It's put out through like the Catholic Voice and various other places. Wherever you live, Jack, if it's not in the Archdiocese of Omaha, there might be something similar. I think it's fairly common practice around the country. But to the broader point, it's hard to find good coverage of all Catholic issues, even EWTN, and they do a good job. Don't misunderstand me. EWTN does a very good job, but even they can't cover everything. It's very difficult to get everything that's important from a Catholic perspective and give it the coverage that it deserves. They're one network. They can't do it all. But be very, very careful, Jack, about. For example, there are all kinds of websites out there that call themselves Catholic. They're using the title, but they're really not reflecting church doctrine. That's where it's very important to have your gold standards, the catechism, the magisterium, the teachings of the church, things like that. And then to be able to look at a particular source of news and compare and say, well, does this really match up or not? Every once in a while, there will be one that the church will come out and say, that's really not a very reliable source of Catholic information. If you see something like that, then I would be very skeptical of that particular source, the website or the paper or whatever it might happen to be. But just remember, just because a news source calls itself Catholic doesn't mean that it really is. And it works in both directions. You got so-called Catholic sites that are way off to the, for lack of a better way to put it, the left, and ones that are way off to the right, and they can be equally inaccurate. So, no, Jack, it's not a sin to continue to be a consumer of those sites, but be an informed consumer of the news that you see. Now, as far as the secular news media is concerned, same caveat. There are secular news organizations that are actually pretty solid and pretty good. There are other ones that have an animus against the church one way or another. So, again, you got to be informed. You got to do your homework. But it's not a sin. It's not wrong just to read that stuff, so long as you keep in mind what it is you're reading.
Our next question comes from Joe.
Joe, very good.
And as I was driving and listening to Catholic radio, I heard it is Vocations Awareness Week.
It is.
And this question ties into that.
Oh, Joe, you done good.
I'm considering a vocation to the priesthood.
God bless you, Joe.
I feel I might be being called to it. What is the best way to discern, Father?
Oh, Joe, thank you for asking that question. And thank you for being open to the possibility of it. Now, the best way to discern, I mean, there are as many good ways to discern as there are people trying to do discernment, but there are going to be some fairly common themes in all good discernment. And the first good common theme is to remain a frequent receiver of the sacrament of the Eucharist and the sacrament of confession. Okay, if you're trying to discern a vocation, you need to be going to confession, Joe, I would say at a minimum once a month. Okay? Because sin will make you not able to hear the voice of God quite as well. And so even if you're sitting there going, I really haven't committed any egregious sins in the last month, get to confession anyway. The sanctifying grace that you receive in that sacrament will be invaluable in your discernment of God's will. Then get to Mass as often as you can. Receive the Eucharist with great devotion as often as you can. Because if you're going to be discerning the voice of Christ calling you to the priesthood, what better way than actually to receive Him in the sacrament, to take Him within yourself. So those two things, I think, are paramount. That's the most important things are frequent reception of the Eucharist, frequent reception of the sacrament of confession. Prayer, especially in front of the Blessed Sacrament. You're not going to be able to do this without a lot of time on your knees. And in your prayer, make sure that you spend most of your time being quiet. Talk, don't get me wrong, but don't forget to shut up. and don't forget to give God the space. You got to embrace the silence because it's in the silence that God speaks. Okay. Next thing, Joe, get yourself, if you don't already have one, get yourself a good spiritual director. Now, maybe it's going to be difficult for you wherever you are. I don't know. If you're here in the Archdiocese of Omaha, I can give you a few recommendations, but it might be difficult for you to find a good spiritual director. Maybe your parish priest would be willing to do it. Maybe there's a religious order somewhere near you where the folks there offer spiritual direction. Call your diocese and ask, hey, is there a list of people around here who offer spiritual direction? Call the diocese and ask to speak to the vocations director. And ask him, okay, I'm considering this, but I don't know yet. I don't know if it's for me. Is there somebody I could use as a spiritual director to help me figure this out, to walk this journey with me, things like that. And then the last thing I'm going to mention to you, Joe, is in order to discern a vocation, is cultivate your relationship with the Blessed Virgin Mary. I cannot tell you how important that is. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is better at pointing out Jesus to us than his mother. On my wall, I keep a copy, a picture of the Our Lady of Vladimir Madonna. It's an icon. It's behind you, Jeff. But it's a beautiful. I used it as my prayer card when I was ordained a priest. And the thing I like about it is you got the baby Jesus in Mary's arms, and he's pressing his cheek right up to hers. But then she's looking straight at you. And with her right hand, she supports the baby, but with her left hand, she's pointing to him as if to say, okay, here you go. And that's what Mary will do for you. So cultivate your relationship with the Blessed Virgin. Pray the Rosary a lot. Ask her for her help and her intercession. She'll never lead you wrong.
Our last question today, Father, comes from Phil.
Phil, very good.
And Phil says, I've been thinking a lot lately about what God's mission is for me in my life. Mm-hmm. In terms of what he wants from me to do, what he wants me to do, and how.
Okay.
How do we figure out what that is? How do we let that lead our decisions on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. And how do we avoid complacency?
Okay, well,
a lot there, Father.
Yeah, quite a bit. But Phil, the first thing I'm going to say to you is, remember what I just said to Joe? Okay, ditto. Because discerning the vocation of the priesthood and discerning what God wants of me in my life, it's basically 2 chapters of the same book. And so the principles are going to be the same. Be attentive to the Eucharist and confession, and a good spiritual director is always a helpful thing. Cultivate your relationship with the Blessed Virgin, things like that. But then, how do you avoid complacency? Let me tell you, Phil, if you can figure that one out, you can write a book and make some money. But the best thing I can think of to avoid complacency is the prayer life. Fidelity to the quiet prayer, the fidelity to going in and wherever your prayer spot happens to be, whether it's in front of the Blessed Sacrament, which is my recommendation, but there's nothing wrong with having, and everything right, as a matter of fact, with having a prayer space in your own home, things like that. But, get in there, and one of your prayers needs to be, God, please help me not be complacent. God doesn't want you to be complacent any more than you do, but we're fallible human beings. We fall into it. It's easy to do. So in your prayer, Phil, ask God, help me to not be complacent. And then as far as where it leads you, that I can't answer. I can't answer how that's going to affect your decisions in your day-to-day life, just because that's up to God. What you need to be is open to his lead, and in the best sense of the word, pliant. Okay? Willing to adapt to God throwing you a curveball every once in a while.
He does throw curveballs.
Oh, yes. He's got a better curveball than Kershaw. But I'm sorry, I still miss baseball. Be ready, Phil, for a few surprises, and be willing to walk wherever it is he wants to lead you. But keep the prayer life solid, and then as far as figuring out what God's mission is for you, keep in mind he does have one. But the way to figure it out is the same as I just told Joe. Eucharist, confession, prayer, spiritual direction, if that's a possibility for you, and then don't forget about the Blessed Virgin Mary.
There's some excellent books on discernment too. Father
Some
Timothy
wonderful.
Gallagher,
I was just thinking of that one.
Puts out some great books.
Gallagher's got some
Runik
great
has another really good book on discernment. So there are some resources out there as well.
Yeah, let's put those in the show notes too.
We will. Thank you, Father.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. God bless. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your friends and relatives. Go to Apple Podcasts, give us a review and a rating. It'll help us to reach more men. We also have a Facebook and Instagram page, Regular Catholic Guy. God bless.